The crystal chandeliers of Adagio cast fractured light across the white tablecloths, turning the Manhattan restaurant into a constellation of wealth and whispered conversations. Marcus Thornwood sat alone at his usual corner table, his fingers absently turning the platinum ring that had become both talisman and torture over the past 5 years. The ring caught the candlelight, its geometric pattern surrounding a rare blue sapphire that seemed to hold an ocean of memories. Only 3 such rings had ever been crafted for the Thornwood family. 3 brothers, 3 rings, 3 destinies that had all somehow led to emptiness. Tonight marked 25 years since he and Diana had opened the first Thornwood Grand Hotel. 25 years of building an empire that now stretched across continents, with 30 locations and revenues that made business journals write breathless profiles. But the chair across from him remained empty, as it had for 1,825 days. Marcus lifted his glass of 1982 Bordeaux, watching the wine catch the light the same way Diana's eyes used to catch the sun on the terrace of their Malibu home. The sommelier had poured it with the reverent silence that all the Adagio staff maintained around him, especially on this night. They knew better than to ask how he was doing. They knew better than to mention the anniversary. They simply moved through their choreographed rituals of service while Marcus sat in his corner, reviewing quarterly reports on his tablet, as if numbers could fill the void that used to hold laughter and love. Thornwood Grand Tokyo had just opened to sold-out reservations for the next 6 months. The business pages were calling him the hotel king of the modern era, a titan of luxury hospitality who had transformed the industry with his vision of intimate grandeur. What they didn't write about were the nights he slept in his office because the silence of his penthouse felt like drowning. What they didn't know was that every success tasted like ash without someone to share it with. The commotion near the entrance started as a ripple of disapproval from the maitre d', then grew into something louder. Marcus glanced up, annoyed that someone had disrupted the carefully cultivated atmosphere of refined dining. What he saw made him freeze with his wine glass halfway to his lips. A child had somehow slipped past security. A small girl, no more than 8 years old, with tangled blonde hair that hung in dirty strands around a face smudged with grime. Her clothes were torn in several places, stained with what looked like days of wear. Her feet were completely bare despite the cool April evening outside. But what struck Marcus most powerfully was the look in her eyes as she stared at the nearby tables. It was hunger, yes, but also something deeper. A desperate awareness that this world of plenty existed while she had nothing. The security guard reached for her arm, but Marcus raised his hand. The gesture was small but absolute. In a room where he was known and respected, it carried the weight of command. "Let her stay," he called across the suddenly silent dining room. Every head had turned. Women in evening gowns clutched their pearls. Men in tailored suits exchanged scandalized glances. Marcus didn't care. Something about the child's courage in entering this fortress of wealth touched a place in him that had been numb for years. The guard stepped back uncertainly. Marcus beckoned to his server, a young man who had served him countless solitary meals. "Please bring a children's portion of whatever the chef recommends," Marcus said, his voice gentler than it had been in months. Years, perhaps. He turned to the little girl, who stood frozen near the entrance as if she couldn't quite believe she wasn't being thrown out. "Would you like something to eat?" She nodded silently, her eyes going wide with surprise and something that might have been hope. She moved toward his table with the careful steps of someone who had learned that good things could be snatched away at any moment. Marcus pulled out the chair that Diana used to occupy, the one that had sat empty through so many lonely dinners. "What's your name?" he asked as she climbed onto the plush velvet seat, her small frame almost swallowed by its size. "Lily," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the resumed murmur of conversation as the other diners returned to their meals, though many still cast curious glances their way. "I'm Marcus," he replied, offering his hand with the same formality he would show a business associate. There was something about treating her with dignity that felt important, essential even. Lily stared at his extended hand for a long moment, as if no adult had ever offered to shake hands with her before. Then she reached out with her small, dirt-smudged fingers and shook it with surprising firmness. When the food arrived, an elegantly plated pasta dish with butter sauce and fresh herbs, Lily didn't hesitate. She ate with the single-minded focus of someone who had missed too many meals, who had learned that you ate when food was available because you never knew when the next opportunity would come. Marcus watched her, something tightening in his chest. He had donated millions to children's charities over the years, written checks that funded entire programs. But seeing this child's hunger up close affected him in a way those abstract transactions never had. As Lily ate, her eyes occasionally darted around the restaurant, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the fine china, the men in tuxedos, and women in designer dresses. During one of these glances, her gaze stopped on Marcus's hand, specifically on his ring. "My mama has a ring just like yours," she said suddenly, her voice clear and innocent in the way only a child's voice can be. She pointed to his hand with a butter-smeared finger, with the blue stone and the funny shapes around it. She keeps it in a little box and only takes it out sometimes to look at it. She cries when she does. The restaurant around Marcus seemed to fade away. The murmur of conversation became white noise. The soft classical music playing in the background disappeared. Even the food on his own plate, untouched, ceased to exist. All that remained was Lily's finger pointing at his ring and her words echoing in his mind. The ring on Marcus's finger was one of only 3 ever made. The first was his, worn every day since his grandfather had passed it down on his 21st birthday. The second had disappeared with his twin brother Ethan when their sailboat had been caught in a storm 25 years ago. The Coast Guard had searched for weeks, but they'd only found Marcus clinging to debris, half dead from exposure. Ethan had vanished into the Pacific, and with him, the second Thornwood ring. And the third ring, the third had been on Diana's finger when they buried her empty casket after the car accident that had consumed her vehicle in flames so intense that identification had been possible only through dental records and personal effects. The ring had been among those effects, recovered from the safety deposit box they'd shared. Except now this child was saying her mother had a ring just like his. Marcus set down his wineglass with a hand that trembled slightly. His mind raced through possibilities, each one more impossible than the last. "Your mother," he said carefully, struggling to keep his voice steady, to not frighten this little girl, with the desperate hope suddenly clawing at his chest. "What's her name?" Lily tilted her head, considering the question as if weighing whether this information should be shared with a stranger, even a kind stranger who had given her food. "Kate," she finally said, "but sometimes she calls herself Sarah when we have to move again." Kate. Diana had always preferred Kate among friends, had introduced herself that way at parties, had signed personal notes with that name. Marcus felt his heart pounding so hard he was certain Lily could hear it. Certain everyone in the restaurant could hear it, like drums announcing the impossible. "Do you," he started, then had to stop and clear his throat. "Do you have a picture of your mom?" Lily nodded, reaching into the torn pocket of her dress. She pulled out a crumpled, dirty piece of paper and handed it to him, with the same trust she'd shown when shaking his hand, as if she sensed, somehow, that this moment mattered in ways she couldn't yet understand. Marcus carefully unfolded the photograph, his hands trembling now without any attempt to hide it. The image was worn and faded, creased from being folded and unfolded countless times. But the woman in it was unmistakable. Diana, older than he remembered, thinner, with new lines of weariness etched into her face that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Her hair, once lustrous and dark, was now streaked with premature gray. But her eyes, those distinctive hazel eyes that had been the first thing he'd fallen in love with, stared back at him from the photograph. Her smile in the picture was small and sad, nothing like the radiant joy she'd shown in the photos from their wedding, from the opening of their first hotel, from the 1,000 happy moments they'd shared. But it was her. It was undeniably, impossibly her. Marcus stared at the photo, his mind trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what he knew to be true. He had identified her personal effects after the accident. The investigators had been certain no one could have survived that inferno. The medical examiner had matched dental records. There had been a funeral, a burial, a grief so profound that Marcus had seriously considered not surviving it himself. Only the demands of the business had kept him moving through those first terrible months, and even then he'd moved like a ghost through his own life. Yet here was this child, with his wife's face looking back at him from a crumpled photograph. "Where do you live, Lily?" he asked, trying desperately to keep his voice calm despite the storm raging inside him. Every instinct screamed at him to grab this child, to demand answers, to race to wherever her mother was hiding. but he forced himself to be gentle, to move slowly, to not frighten the little girl who was finishing the last of her pasta with obvious pleasure. In Millfield, she replied, naming a small town about 2 hours north of the city, behind the old Wheeler house. Mom says we have to stay quiet so people don't know we're there. Marcus discreetly signaled to his server, his mind already racing ahead. When the young man approached, Marcus whispered instructions that would have seemed bizarre under any other circumstances. Please keep her glass when she's done. Don't wash it. I'll explain later. The server looked confused, but nodded. In a restaurant where Marcus Thornwood was a valued regular, where his tips were generous and his requests always reasonable, this small oddity would be accommodated without question. As Lily finished her meal, soaking up the last traces of butter sauce with a piece of bread, Marcus made a call to Davis Chen, his personal assistant. Davis had been with him for a decade, had seen him through the worst of his grief, and knew better than to ask questions when Marcus's voice carried that particular edge of barely controlled emotion. I need an urgent favor, Marcus said quietly, stepping away from the table for a moment. Contact Dr. Jennings at Biogen Labs. I'll be sending a sample for immediate DNA analysis. Compare it against my profile on file. I don't care what it costs or who you have to wake up, I need results tonight. There was a pause on the line, then Davis's calm, professional voice. Understood, sir. I'll make the arrangements immediately. When Marcus returned to the table, Lily was using her last piece of bread to capture every molecule of sauce remaining on her plate. The thoroughness of it made Marcus's heart ache. How many meals had she missed to develop such careful habits? Would you like some dessert? He asked, forcing a smile despite the turmoil inside him. Lily's eyes lit up with a joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. Yes, please. While she enjoyed a bowl of vanilla gelato with fresh berries, Marcus tried to process what was happening. If Diana was alive, why had she disappeared? Why had she allowed him to believe she was dead? And this child, this beautiful, brave little girl who was eating gelato as if it were the finest treasure in the world, could she possibly be his daughter? Marcus did the math quickly in his head. Lily appeared to be about 8 years old. If Diana had been pregnant when she disappeared 5 years ago, the timing would be right. The possibility sent a wave of dizziness through him so powerful he had to grip the edge of the table. Lily, he said when she had finished her dessert, her face showing contentment for the first time since she'd entered the restaurant. I need to take you home. Your mother must be worried about you. Fear flashed across the girl's face, replacing the contentment with anxiety. Mom told me not to talk to strangers. She'll be mad I came here. I'm not a stranger anymore, Marcus said gently, with a warmth that surprised him. It had been so long since he'd felt anything but numbness. We had dinner together. We're friends now, and I promise I just want to make sure you get home safely. That's what friends do. After some hesitation, Lily agreed. As they walked to his car, Marcus instructed Davis to collect Lily's glass and rush it to Biogen Labs. Then he helped the little girl into the back seat of his armored Bentley, noting how her eyes widened at the luxury vehicle, how she ran her small hand over the leather upholstery as if it were made of silk. As they pulled away from the restaurant, Marcus caught glimpses of Lily in the rearview mirror. She had Diana's eyes, he realized with a jolt. The shape of her chin, the way she tilted her head when thinking, the delicate bone structure of her face. How had he not seen it immediately? Every gesture, every expression was a ghost of the woman he had loved, still loved, would always love. The drive to Millfield felt endless. Marcus gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white, his mind racing with questions that had no answers. Lily dozed in the back seat, exhausted from her adventure and the first full meal she'd probably had in days. The GPS directed him to the outskirts of town, to a neighborhood that seemed to exist in a different century, perhaps a different world entirely. The contrast to his Manhattan penthouse, to the gleaming lobbies of his hotels was so stark it felt like crossing into a foreign country. Houses with boarded windows stood next to overgrown yards, filled with the rusted skeletons of abandoned cars. Streetlights were broken more often than functional, leaving pools of darkness between islands of sickly yellow illumination. Which one is the Wheeler house? Marcus asked softly when Lily stirred awake, his voice gentle to hide the rage building in him that anyone, especially Diana, especially his child, should have to live in such conditions. That one, she pointed to a dilapidated Victorian home set back from the road, its former grandeur now a memory told in peeling paint and broken shutters. But we live in the little house behind it. Marcus parked his Bentley, the luxury vehicle conspicuously out of place in this forgotten corner of Millfield. The car probably cost more than every structure on this block combined. As Lily led him through an overgrown path beside the main house, his phone vibrated. It was Davis. Sir? His assistant's voice was tight with suppressed emotion. Dr. Jennings is expediting the analysis, but she needs a few more hours for complete results. Understood. Keep me posted, Marcus replied, ending the call as they approached a converted garden shed behind the Victorian house. The structure couldn't have been more than 400 square feet. Paint peeled from its walls in long strips, and the single window was covered with what looked like cardboard. But light glowed from within, and as they got closer, Marcus could hear movement inside. Lily ran ahead to a door with peeling paint. Mom, I'm home, she called out, her voice bright with the innocence of a child who didn't yet understand the magnitude of what was about to happen. A woman's voice answered from inside, tired but warm. Lily, where have you been? I was so worried. The door opened, and there she was. Diana stood frozen in the doorway. Her once lustrous dark hair now dull and streaked with premature gray. Her face thinner than he remembered, her body almost fragile in its slenderness. But her eyes, those distinctive hazel eyes that had haunted his dreams for 5 years, widened in shock as she saw him standing behind Lily. Marcus, she whispered, the color draining from her face as if she'd seen a ghost, which in a way she had, just as he was seeing one. Time seemed to stop as they stared at each other across 5 years of absence, across an ocean of grief and secrets, and questions that had no answers. Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the woman he'd buried, the woman he'd mourned every single day, the woman who was somehow, impossibly, standing in front of him alive. Lily looked between them, confusion evident in her young face. Mom, do you know him? Diana pulled Lily protectively against her, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Fear, guilt, sorrow, all mixed together in a way that made Marcus's chest tighten even more. Go inside, sweetheart, she said, her voice trembling. Please. But Mom, Lily protested. Now, Lily. The sharpness in Diana's voice was uncharacteristic, born of panic. Lily, sensing something momentous was happening, reluctantly disappeared into the shed. Diana stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind her. In the dim light from a single bulb above the door, Marcus could see how thin she had become, how her clothes hung loosely on her frame. But she was here. She was real. She was alive. You need to leave, Diana said, her voice low and urgent. Please, Marcus, just go. The words broke through his paralysis. 5 years, Marcus said, his voice cracking with the weight of all those days, all those nights. 5 years. I thought you were gone. I identified your personal effects. I buried an empty coffin. I mourned you every single day, Diana. Every single day. Diana wrapped her arms around herself, looking away as if she couldn't bear to meet his eyes. I'm not who you think I am. Stop lying, Marcus said, his voice growing firmer even as his heart shattered all over again. I know it's you, Diana. Lily showed me your picture. She told me about your ring, the Thornwood ring. There were only 3 ever made, and I know where every single one should be. You're mistaken, she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. The words were hollow, a script she was reciting without belief. The girl, Marcus pressed on, desperate now. She's 8 years old. Was she? He couldn't finish the question, couldn't force the words out past the hope and terror lodged in his throat. Diana's silence was answer enough. Why? The word came out as a broken whisper. Marcus took a step closer, then another, his hands trembling. Why would you do this? Make me believe you were gone. Keep my child from me. What could possibly be worth that? You wouldn't understand, Diana whispered, tears now streaming down her face, catching the light from the bare bulb above them. Then make me understand, Marcus pleaded. I deserve that much, don't I? After 5 years of hell, don't I deserve to know why? I had to protect her, Diana said, her voice breaking. Protect both of you. Protect us from what? Before she could answer, the door cracked open again. Lily peered out at them, her young face troubled by the sight of her mother crying. Mom, why are you crying? She asked, her voice small and worried. Diana quickly wiped her tears, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Everything's fine, honey. Mr. Thornwood was just leaving. No, Marcus said firmly, his voice carrying the authority he used in boardrooms, the certainty he used when closing deals worth hundreds of millions. I'm not going anywhere until I get answers. His phone rang. Davis, with perfect timing. Marcus answered, turning slightly away from Diana and Lily. Sir. Davis's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the undercurrent of shock. Preliminary results from Dr. Jennings. I'm sending you the full report, but she wanted me to call immediately. The sample shows a parent-child relationship. The confidence level is over 99.9%. Sir, the child is unquestionably yours. Despite having suspected it, despite having seen Lily's resemblance to Diana, hearing the confirmation made Marcus's knees weak. He had a daughter who had been living in poverty while he commanded a multi-billion-dollar empire, a daughter whose entire childhood he had missed. Let me in, Diana, he said when he ended the call, his voice gentle but resolute. Let me see where my daughter has been living. After a moment's hesitation, a war playing out behind her eyes, Diana stepped aside. She held the door open with a hand that shook slightly, and Marcus entered the small structure that had been her home. The interior of the shed was barely 400 square feet, converted into a rudimentary living space that made Marcus's soul ache. A single mattress lay on the floor in one corner, covered with worn blankets that had been carefully mended multiple times. A hot plate and mini refrigerator comprised the kitchen area, sitting on a makeshift counter made from salvaged wood. The bathroom was nothing more than a curtained-off corner with a camp toilet and a plastic basin for washing. A small shelf held what must be Lily's possessions. Some second-hand books with cracked spines and missing covers. A worn teddy bear with one eye. A handmade doll crafted from fabric scraps. These were the treasures of a child who had grown up with nothing. The contrast to the luxury that had surrounded Diana in their previous life was staggering. She had lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, had worn designer clothes, had never wanted for anything. And now she was here, in this converted shed, raising their daughter in conditions that made Marcus physically ill. You've been here all this time? He asked, his voice hollow with shock and grief. Diana nodded, keeping Lily close to her side. Not always here. We've moved around. But why, Diana? I had resources, connections. Whatever trouble you were in, whatever threatened you, we could have faced it together. I wasn't in trouble, she interrupted. You were. Marcus stared at her, not comprehending. Diana sighed, looking down at Lily. Honey, can you please get your pajamas on? It's past your bedtime. Lily looked reluctant to leave, clearly sensing that something important was being discussed. But she obeyed, disappearing behind the makeshift curtain that divided the tiny space. Once Lily was out of earshot, Diana lowered her voice. Do you remember Vincent Moretti? Marcus tensed at the name. Vincent Moretti had been a business associate in his early days of expanding Thornwood Grand Hotels, a silent investor with connections that Robert had later discovered were questionable at best. When Marcus had tried to buy out Moretti's stake in the company, things had gotten ugly. There had been threats, veiled at first, then more direct. Marcus had eventually paid far more than the stake was worth just to be free of the association. But that had been over 6 years ago. What about him? Marcus asked, though dread was already pooling in his stomach. The night before the accident, Diana said, choosing her words carefully with Lily so close by. He approached me in the parking garage at your office building. He knew I was there to surprise you for lunch. He showed me photos, Marcus. Photos of us at home, at restaurants, even at my doctor's appointment, where I'd just confirmed my pregnancy. She swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she wrapped her arms around herself. He told me that if I didn't disappear from your life completely, he would make sure neither of us survived the week. He was explicit about what would happen if I told you. He said he'd act immediately. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Why didn't you come to me? We could have handled it together. Gone to the police. Used my security team. He showed me what happened to the last person who went to the police about him, Diana said, her voice barely above a whisper. A federal prosecutor, Marcus. They found parts of him scattered across 3 states. Moretti had connections everywhere. In the police department, in the FBI, judges, politicians. You were successful, but you weren't untouchable. Not against someone like him. So you just left? Marcus's voice broke. You let me think you died in that accident? Diana nodded, tears flowing freely now. I had to make a choice in that moment. I chose to protect you and our unborn child the only way I could, by becoming a ghost. Marcus thought about the accident, the twisted metal, the fire so hot it had melted everything. How did you stage it? I had a friend from college who worked in movie special effects, Diana explained. We set it up to look real. Made sure they'd find enough to identify me through the items in the car and the dental records I'd prepared, but not enough to. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. And then you just disappeared, Marcus said, still struggling to process it all. I had some emergency cash saved. I cut my hair, dyed it, changed my name to Sarah Wells. I moved constantly at first, terrified he'd find me. Eventually, I settled here when Lily was about 3. I worked whatever jobs I could find that paid cash. Diners, cleaning houses, anything that didn't require documentation that could be traced. Did you ever try to find out what happened after you left? Marcus asked, a horrible suspicion forming. Moretti had a health crisis 6 months after your disappearance. A massive stroke. He's been dead for over 4 years now, Diana. Diana's eyes widened in genuine shock. I heard rumors a year or so ago, but I couldn't be sure. I wanted to be sure, Marcus. God, I wanted to verify it so badly, Diana continued, her voice trembling. But how could I? Every library computer keeps logs. Every internet cafe has cameras. Moretti's people were everywhere, in law enforcement, in government. What if his death was a lie to draw me out? What if his associates were watching, waiting for me to search his name? She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. I had Lily sleeping in the back of our car at the time. She was 3 years old. One wrong click, one digital footprint, and they could have found us within hours. So I stayed hidden, because even a 1% chance of being wrong meant my daughter could die. Was I supposed to risk her life on a rumor? Marcus felt the logic of it, the impossible mathematics of motherhood. No, he said quietly, you did what you had to do. And by then, she gestured helplessly around the shed. I thought it was too late, that you'd have moved on, maybe remarried, or that you'd never forgive me for what I did. Forgive you? Marcus stepped closer, his voice breaking. Diana, I never moved on. I threw myself into work during the day and drank myself to sleep most nights. The only thing that gave my life any meaning was donating to causes you cared about. I established the Catherine Thornwood Foundation to help women and children in crisis. Every time I wrote a check, I was thinking of you. Lily emerged from behind the curtain, now dressed in faded pajamas, with cartoon characters Marcus didn't recognize. She looked between the two adults, sensing the heavy emotion in the air. Is everything okay? She asked in a small voice. Marcus looked at his daughter, truly looked at her, and saw both himself and Diana in her features. The shape of her nose was his. The curve of her smile was Diana's. The intelligence in her eyes came from both of them. This beautiful, brave little girl who had walked into a fancy restaurant with bare feet because she was hungry. His daughter, who he hadn't known existed until tonight. Lily, Diana said gently, Mr. Thornwood and I need to talk privately for a while. Can you read your book in bed? Lily nodded reluctantly and climbed onto the mattress in the corner, picking up a dog-eared paperback with a broken spine. But Marcus could see she was listening to every word. He turned back to Diana, lowering his voice. You don't have to live like this anymore, either of you. Please, just come back with me tonight. I have plenty of room. We can figure everything else out tomorrow. Diana hesitated, years of fear and survival instincts warring with the hope in his eyes. I don't know if I can just walk back into your life after everything. Then don't think of it as walking back into my life, Marcus said, his voice soft but urgent. Think of it as giving Lily the life she deserves. A warm bed, regular meals, school, safety, everything you've worked so hard to provide for her but couldn't because you were doing it alone. Diana glanced at their daughter, who was pretending to read but was clearly listening to every word. The decision visibly weighed on her, years of protective instincts battling with the undeniable truth of their situation. We'll come for tonight, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, but I'm not making any promises beyond that. Relief flooded through Marcus like a physical force. It was a start, a small one, fragile and uncertain, but more than he'd dared hope for just hours ago when he'd been sitting alone in that restaurant, commemorating what he thought was a life and love lost forever. Pack whatever you need, he said softly. We can get anything else tomorrow. As Diana gathered their meager belongings into a single worn duffel bag, Marcus watched Lily. She had abandoned any pretense of reading and was now openly staring at him with curious eyes that held both Diana's wariness and his own directness. His daughter. The very thought filled him with a wonder so profound it was almost painful, and a fierce protectiveness he had never experienced before. Every moment of her life that he'd missed felt like a physical wound. Her first words, her first steps, her first day of whatever makeshift schooling Diana had been able to provide. Birthdays celebrated with homemade cakes and secondhand toys. All of it. Gone. Lost to Moretti's threats and Diana's desperate choice. But she was here now. They both were. And Marcus made a silent vow that he would spend the rest of his life making up for the years they'd lost. "Are we going on an adventure, Mom?" Lily asked, as Diana zipped the duffel bag closed, her voice holding the excitement of a child who had learned to find joy in small things. Diana exchanged a look with Marcus, something unspoken passing between them. A question. A possibility. The faint stirring of the connection they'd once shared. "Yes, sweetheart," Diana said, her voice thick with emotion. "We're going on an adventure." The ride back to Manhattan was surreal. Marcus kept glancing in the rearview mirror, still unable to believe that Diana and Lily were really in his car. Lily had fallen asleep almost immediately, her head resting on Diana's lap, exhaustion finally claiming her after her eventful evening. Diana stroked her daughter's hair absently, her gaze fixed on the passing darkness outside the window. "She has your eyes," Marcus said softly, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since they left Millfield. Diana looked up, meeting his gaze in the mirror. "And your stubbornness," she replied. And for just a moment the ghost of a smile touched her lips before fading away. They lapsed back into silence until they reached the private garage beneath Marcus's building. As the elevator ascended to the penthouse, Lily woke up, her eyes widening as she took in the polished brass fixtures and marble floors. "Do you live in a castle?" she asked Marcus, fully awake now and pressing her small hands against the mirrored walls of the elevator. "Not exactly," Marcus replied with a gentle smile, "but it's a nice place. I think you'll like it." When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, Lily gasped. The sprawling apartment featured floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering Manhattan skyline, with lights spreading out like a blanket of stars across the city. Museum-quality artwork adorned the walls. The furnishings were elegant and expensive, each piece carefully selected over years of collecting. "You live here all by yourself?" Lily asked, walking cautiously across the gleaming hardwood floors as if afraid she might damage them with her bare feet. "I do," Marcus answered, watching as Diana took in the apartment. He had redecorated extensively after her presumed death, unable to live with the constant reminders. The penthouse Diana saw now was different from the home they'd shared, though the bones of it remained the same. "It's very big," Diana said quietly, clutching their single duffel bag like a lifeline. "Let me show you to the guest rooms," Marcus said, leading them down a hallway. "Lily, this one can be yours for tonight." He opened a door to reveal a tastefully decorated bedroom with a queen-sized bed covered in soft linens. Lily approached the bed cautiously, reaching out to touch the comforter as if it might disappear. "The whole bed is just for me?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. The innocent question hit Marcus like a physical blow. What kind of life had his daughter been living while he enjoyed every luxury? How many nights had she shared that single mattress on the floor with Diana, both of them crowded together in that tiny shed? "Yes, sweetheart," Diana answered when Marcus seemed unable to speak. "It's all yours." "Let's get you settled," Diana said, her voice gentle, as she guided Lily toward the bedroom. While Diana helped Lily prepare for bed, Marcus went to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of scotch with shaking hands. By the time Diana joined him, he had drained it and was contemplating another. "She's asleep," Diana said, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "The bed is bigger than our entire home in Millfield. She's a bit overwhelmed." "She's not the only one," Marcus replied, setting down his empty glass. The crystal made a soft clink against the marble counter. "I still can't believe you're here, that she's here, that any of this is real." Diana crossed her arms protectively across her chest. "Marcus, Whatever she was about to say was interrupted by the doorbell. Marcus frowned. It was nearly midnight. "That must be Davis. I asked him to bring over some essentials for you both." He returned moments later with his personal assistant, a serious-looking man in his early 30s, carrying several shopping bags. Davis's eyes widened almost imperceptibly when he saw Diana, but his professional demeanor remained intact. The items you requested, sir, Davis said, setting the bags on the counter. Clothing, toiletries, and some basic necessities for both Mrs. Thornwood and the child. Thank you, Davis, Marcus said. That will be all for tonight. After Davis left, Diana approached the bags cautiously. You didn't have to do this. Of course I did, Marcus replied, watching her reaction carefully. You can't wear the same clothes forever, and Lily deserves... He stopped himself, seeing Diana's expression harden. Deserves what? She challenged. To suddenly have everything handed to her? Do you think I haven't wanted to give her everything? Do you think I chose this life for us? That's not what I meant, Marcus said quickly, recognizing his mistake. I just meant that now that I know about her, about you both being alive, I want to help. I want to provide for my family. Diana's shoulders slumped, the fight going out of her. I know, I'm sorry. It's just, this is all so much. She gestured around the luxurious kitchen. 5 years of surviving day to day, and suddenly we're here, in this palace. It doesn't feel real. Marcus wanted to reach for her, to pull her into his arms as he would have done without hesitation in their life before. But he maintained his distance, respecting the invisible barrier she had erected between them. Why don't you get some rest, he suggested. The guest room next to Lily's is prepared. We can talk more in the morning. Diana nodded, gathering the shopping bags. Thank you, Marcus, for everything tonight. After she left, Marcus wandered through his empty living room, feeling more alive than he had in 5 years, despite the turmoil of emotions. He stopped at his home office and unlocked a hidden panel in the bookshelf, revealing a small safe. Inside was a velvet box containing Diana's Thornwood ring, the third ring, recovered from their safety deposit box after her supposed death. He closed his fingers around the box, remembering the day he had placed that ring on her finger 12 years ago. They had been so young, so full of hope and dreams. Diana had worn a simple white dress on the beach in Malibu, her feet bare in the sand, her smile brighter than the sunset behind them. She had promised to love him until death parted them. Death had parted them, or so he'd believed. But she had never stopped wearing the ring, even in hiding. Even when she had nothing else, she had kept that symbol of their love. The thought made his chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. Could they ever find their way back to that place of trust and love? Or had too much happened, too much time passed, too many secrets been kept? Marcus didn't know. But as he placed the velvet box back in the safe and locked it away, he knew one thing with certainty. He would do whatever it took to keep Diana and Lily in his life now that he'd found them again. Whatever it took. Marcus barely slept that night. Every sound from the guest wing sent him sitting upright in bed, half expecting to find the rooms empty. Diana and Lily vanished like smoke. At dawn, he gave up on sleep entirely and went to his home office, reviewing documents he couldn't focus on while his mind raced with plans and possibilities. By 7 in the morning, he had made several decisions. He was at his desk making calls when Diana appeared in the doorway, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans from the bags Davis had brought. The clothes fit reasonably well, though she looked almost fragile in them, as if a strong wind might carry her away. "You're up early," she said, lingering at the threshold as if unsure whether she was allowed to enter. "I had some things to take care of," Marcus replied, standing. He moved to the kitchen, desperate for something normal to do with his hands. "Coffee?" She nodded, following him. As he prepared their drinks, his hands moved automatically to add a splash of cream and 2 sugars to hers, exactly as she had always taken it. When he handed her the mug, her eyes widened slightly. "You remembered," she said softly. "I remember everything about you, Diana," he replied simply, the words carrying more weight than he'd intended. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze, her fingers wrapping around the warm mug as if anchoring herself. They stood in silence for a moment, the morning light streaming through the floor to ceiling windows and painting the kitchen in shades of gold. The soft padding of small feet announced Lily's arrival before she appeared, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She stopped short when she saw them, suddenly shy in the brightness of morning, as if the magic of last night might have worn off and she'd be asked to leave. "Good morning, sweetheart," Diana said, her voice warming in a way it hadn't when speaking to Marcus. "Did you sleep well?" Lily nodded, her eyes darting around the gleaming kitchen with its professional grade appliances and marble countertops. "The bed was really soft. I kept sinking into it." Marcus smiled despite the ache those words caused. "Would you like some breakfast? I can make pancakes." Lily's eyes lit up with an enthusiasm that transformed her entire face. "Really? We never have pancakes." Then pancakes it is, Marcus said, trying to ignore the pang those casual words created. He moved to gather ingredients, grateful for the distraction of cooking. It had been years since he'd made breakfast himself. His private chef usually handled meals, or he grabbed something from one of his hotel restaurants. But there was something about this moment that demanded he do this himself. As he began mixing batter, Diana guided Lily to sit at the kitchen island. "Lily, honey," she started, her voice carrying a weight that made the little girl look up attentively. "There's something important Mr. Thornwood and I need to talk to you about." Lily's face grew serious, her small hands gripping the edge of the counter. "Are we in trouble? Do we have to leave?" "No, sweetheart," Diana assured her quickly. "Nothing like that. It's about Mr. Thornwood, about who he is." Lily frowned slightly, glancing between her mother and Marcus, who had paused in his pancake making to watch this moment unfold. Diana took a deep breath, and Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly. "Lily, Marcus he's your father." The kitchen fell silent except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Lily's eyes went wide, darting between Diana and Marcus, as if waiting for someone to laugh and say it was a joke. "My father?" she finally whispered. "But you said my father was gone." I thought he was too," Diana said gently, reaching for Lily's hand. "Your mother and I, we were separated before you were born. A bad man made threats and your mother had to hide to keep you safe. I didn't know about you until last night." Marcus set down the mixing bowl and came around the island, kneeling so he was at eye level with Lily. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. "I didn't know I had a daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "If I had known, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you, both of you. But now that I do know, Lily, I want you to understand something. You are the most amazing surprise of my life." Lily studied his face with an intensity that reminded him of Diana examining a contract, looking for truth beneath the surface. "Is that why you have the same ring as Mom's?" she asked finally. Marcus nodded, holding up his hand so she could see the platinum band with its geometric pattern surrounding the blue sapphire. "These rings have been in my family for a very long time. There are only 3 of them in the world. This one is mine. Your mother has one. And my brother, who disappeared a long time ago, had the 3rd one." "Do I get one too?" Lily asked, the practicality of childhood cutting through the emotional weight of the moment. Marcus laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he'd laughed? "Not yet. They're a bit too big for you right now, but someday perhaps we can have one made just for you." Lily seemed satisfied with this answer and moved on to her next concern with the adaptability of youth. "If you're my dad, does that mean we're going to live here now?" Marcus and Diana exchanged glances, 1,000 unspoken questions passing between them. "We haven't figured everything out yet," Diana answered carefully. "But for now, we're staying here as your father's guests." "I want you both to stay," Marcus said firmly, looking at Diana as much as Lily. "This place has always been too big for just me. It was meant for a family." As they ate breakfast together, Marcus observed the easy way Diana interacted with Lily. The gentle corrections when Lily talked with her mouth full. The inside jokes that made them both giggle. The shorthand that had developed between them over 8 years of having only each other. He had missed so much. Every milestone, every moment, every day of his daughter's life had passed without him. "I have some things to take care of at the office today," Marcus said as they finished eating, though the truth was he had already delegated most of his meetings to his executive team. "But I was thinking we could all have dinner together tonight. Maybe go shopping beforehand. Lily probably needs some more clothes. School supplies." "School?" Lily perked up immediately. "I haven't been to real school in a long time. Mom teaches me at home." Marcus raised an eyebrow at Diana, who shrugged with a mixture of defensiveness and resignation. "We moved around too much, and we couldn't always afford the documentation schools require. Birth certificates, immunization records, proof of residence. It was easier to homeschool her." "Well, that won't be a problem anymore," Marcus assured them. "There's an excellent private school just a few blocks from here, Dalton. The spring term is almost over, but I'm sure we could arrange for Lily to visit, maybe start in the fall." "I don't know, Marcus," Diana began, her voice taking on an edge of anxiety. "Everything's happening so fast." "Mom, please," Lily pleaded, her eyes wide with hope. "I want to go to real school, with other kids and everything." Diana's resistance crumbled in the face of her daughter's excitement. "We'll see," she conceded, the universal parent phrase that meant maybe leaning toward yes. But first, let's just take things one day at a time. After breakfast, Marcus reluctantly prepared to leave for his office. Davis would be available if Diana and Lily needed anything, he explained. Transportation, credit cards, cash, whatever they required. We'll be fine, Diana assured him, though her posture remained tense. We've managed on our own for a long time. That's just it, Marcus said quietly, pausing at the door. You don't have to manage on your own anymore, either of you. As he turned to leave, Lily surprised him by running up and hugging him around the waist. The gesture was spontaneous and trusting in a way that made Marcus's throat tighten. Bye, Dad, she said, testing out the word as if trying on new clothes to see if they fit. Marcus froze for a moment, then knelt down to her level, his eyes suddenly wet. Bye, Lily. I'll see you tonight, okay? I promise I won't be late. Don't be late, she said seriously. Mom hates when people are late. Marcus glanced up at Diana, who was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. I remember, he said softly. Throughout his day at Thornwood Grand Headquarters, Marcus found it nearly impossible to concentrate. He delegated most of his meetings to his executive team, claiming a family emergency, which in a way it was. The biggest emergency and the greatest miracle of his life, all wrapped into one impossible reality. Instead of reviewing expansion plans and profit margins, he focused on making arrangements for Diana and Lily's integration into his life. He called the admissions office at Dalton, pulling strings he rarely used to arrange a meeting. He contacted his legal team about reinstating Diana's identity, a complex process given that she had been legally declared dead. He met with a jeweler about a custom commission, something special that had been forming in his mind since Lily had asked about getting her own ring. By 5 o'clock, he was heading home, something he rarely did at such an early hour. His board members would have been shocked. The Marcus Thornwood they knew worked 16-hour days, slept in his office more often than not, and treated weekends as just another opportunity to expand the empire. But that Marcus Thornwood had been running from grief, filling the void with work because work was something he could control. This Marcus Thornwood, the one ascending in the private elevator to his penthouse, had something to come home to. Someone to come home to. Two someones, actually, and the thought made his heart race in a way no business deal ever had. As the elevator doors opened, he heard laughter. Real, genuine laughter echoing through the penthouse. He followed the sound to find Lily and Diana in the living room, playing some kind of game with pillows. They had built a fort of sorts using the expensive designer cushions from his couch, and Lily was giggling as Diana pretended to be a dragon trying to break in. They both froze when they saw him, Diana's face flushing with embarrassment. I'm sorry, she said quickly, already beginning to dismantle the fort. We were just... Don't, Marcus said, holding up his hand. Please. This place hasn't heard laughter in 5 years. Don't stop on my account. But the spell was broken. Lily helped her mother carefully replace the pillows, and the easy joy that had filled the room moments before evaporated into awkwardness. That evening they ordered dinner from one of Marcus's favorite restaurants. As they ate, Marcus asked Lily about her homeschooling, and she told him enthusiastically about the books she'd read, the math problems she'd solved, the science experiments Diana had improvised with household items. The girl was clearly bright, her natural intelligence shining through despite the gaps in her education. After Lily went to bed, Diana and Marcus found themselves on the terrace, the Manhattan skyline glittering around them like a galaxy of earthbound stars. The night air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of the city that never slept. You've changed, Diana observed, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. Marcus swirled the whiskey in his glass, considering her words. Losing you changed me, he said finally. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that dulled the pain. But it was hollow. Success meant nothing without someone to share it with. Diana looked away, guilt shadowing her features in the dim light. I never wanted to cause you pain. I thought I was protecting you. I know that now, Marcus said softly. But Diana, you have to understand. If you had come to me, we could have faced Moretti together. I had resources, connections. We could have hired the best security in the world, gone to the FBI, disappeared together if we had to. I was pregnant and terrified, Diana replied, her voice barely above a whisper. All I could think about was keeping our baby safe. Moretti showed me crime scene photos, Marcus. What he did to people who crossed him. I couldn't risk our child's life on the possibility that your money and connections might be enough. Marcus couldn't argue with that. As much as it hurt, as much as he wished she had trusted him, He understood the impossible choice she'd faced. "Tell me about her," he said instead, changing the subject to something less painful. "Lily's early years. I've missed so much." Diana's expression softened, the harsh lines of stress and worry easing as she thought about their daughter. She was the most beautiful baby. Hardly ever cried, just watched everything with these serious eyes, taking it all in. Her first word was book, not mama or dada like most kids. She's always been curious, always asking questions about how things work and why things are the way they are. She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. Even when things were at their hardest, when we were living in our car for a few weeks between places, she never complained. She'd make up these elaborate stories about how we were princesses in disguise, living in hiding until our kingdom needed us. Marcus felt his chest tighten. His daughter had lived in a car, had known hunger and fear and uncertainty, while he slept in luxury hotels and dined at Michelin-starred restaurants. His child had pretended homelessness was an adventure because it was the only way to cope with the reality. "You did an amazing job raising her, Diana," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Despite everything, despite the circumstances, she's extraordinary." "We did what we had to do," Diana said simply. "But seeing her here, watching her flourish with all these opportunities, it makes me wonder if I made the right choice all those years ago, if I should have found another way." "You did what you thought was best," Marcus assured her. "That's all any parent can do. And you kept her safe. You kept her alive. That's what matters." They stood in silence for a moment, the city lights twinkling below them like a mirror of the stars above. Marcus wanted to reach for her hand, to close the distance between them, but he held back. Too much had happened. Too much time had passed. They couldn't just pick up where they'd left off, no matter how much part of him wanted to. As May turned to June, they established a tentative routine. Marcus rearranged his entire work schedule to spend more time at home, delegating responsibilities he had previously insisted on handling personally. For the first time in 5 years, Thornwood Grand Hotels was no longer the center of his universe. Lily visited Dalton School and was provisionally accepted for the fall semester, contingent on catching up over the summer with a private tutor. Diana began volunteering at the Catherine Thornwood Foundation, finding it surreal to work for an organization named after her presumed dead self, especially since everyone there believed she was a woman named Sarah Wells, whom Marcus had recently hired. But the adjustment wasn't easy. Lily struggled with the transition from their simple life in Millfield to the overwhelming luxury of the penthouse. She hoarded food in her room, a habit Diana explained had developed during their leaner times when meals weren't guaranteed. She woke up crying from nightmares, terrified they'd have to leave and go back to hiding. One evening in late May, Marcus came home to find Diana and Lily in the middle of an argument. Lily had come home from a playdate at a classmate's house in tears, and Diana was trying to comfort her while also being frustrated. "What happened?" Marcus asked, setting down his briefcase. "She went to Emma Richardson's house today," Diana explained, her voice tight with stress. "Emma's mother asked about our background, where we lived before, why Lily hadn't been in school. Lily didn't know what to say. They laughed at me," Lily said, her voice small and hurt. "When I said we used to live in a shed, they thought I was making it up. Emma's mom looked at Mom like she was crazy." Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, not at the Richardson family, but at the situation, at Moretti, at the unfairness that had put his daughter in this position. But before he could speak, Diana's frustration boiled over. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she said, her voice rising. "She's living in two worlds now, the girl from the shed and the heiress to the Thornwood fortune. How is she supposed to reconcile that? How is she supposed to explain to these privileged children that 6 months ago she was eating from food banks?" "She doesn't have to explain anything to anyone," Marcus said firmly. "Her past is her business." "But Diana, we can't pretend it didn't happen either. It's part of who she is." "Part of who she is?" Diana's eyes flashed with anger. "It's all she's known her entire life. You can't just buy away 8 years of poverty with a fancy apartment and designer clothes." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and cutting. Marcus felt them like a physical blow. "I'm not trying to buy anything," he said quietly. "I'm trying to give my daughter the future she deserves, the future you both deserve." "We don't need your charity, Marcus," Diana shot back. "We survived just fine without you." The moment the words left her mouth, Diana's face crumpled. She knew she'd gone too far, let her own insecurities and fear lash out at the one person who was trying to help. But the damage was done. Marcus stood very still. his face carefully neutral in that way he'd perfected in boardrooms when negotiations turned hostile. I see, he said softly. If that's how you feel, then perhaps we should discuss alternative arrangements. I want to be part of Lily's life, but I won't force myself into yours. Marcus, I didn't mean, Diana started, but he was already walking away, heading to his study and closing the door behind him with a quiet click that was somehow worse than if he'd slammed it. Lily, who had been watching this exchange with wide, frightened eyes, burst into tears. It's my fault, she sobbed. I ruined everything. I should have lied to Emma's mom. I should have. No, baby, no. Diana gathered her daughter into her arms, her own tears falling freely now. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. Mommy said something stupid because she's scared. Scared of what? Lily asked, her voice muffled against Diana's shoulder. Diana pulled back, looking into her daughter's eyes, those eyes that were so much like Marcus's it sometimes hurt to look at them. Scared that we don't belong here, that this life is too good to be true and it's going to disappear. Scared that your father will realize we're more trouble than we're worth. But Dad loves us, Lily said with the simple certainty of childhood. I can see it when he looks at us, the way his eyes get all soft and sad at the same time. Diana held her daughter close, realizing that this 8-year-old had seen something she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. Marcus did love them, despite everything, despite the years and the lies and the complexity of their situation. He loved them. And she had just thrown that love back in his face out of fear and pride. After she'd gotten Lily settled in bed, Diana stood outside Marcus's study for a long moment, gathering her courage. Finally, she knocked softly. Come in, his voice was carefully neutral. She found him standing at the window, looking out over the city, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. He didn't turn around when she entered. I'm sorry, she said quietly. What I said was cruel and unfair. You've been nothing but generous and patient with us, and I repaid that by... She trailed off, unable to finish. By speaking the truth, Marcus said, still not turning around. Maybe you're right, Diana. Maybe I am trying to buy away the past. Maybe I think if I throw enough money at the situation, I can make up for 8 years of missed birthdays and scraped knees and first words. That's not what I meant, Diana said, moving closer. I'm scared, Marcus. I'm terrified, actually. For 8 years, it was just Lily and me against the world. I made all the decisions, bore all the responsibility, and now suddenly I'm here in this palace, and I don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore. Diana Thornwood died 5 years ago. I've been Sarah Wells for so long that Catherine feels like a stranger. Marcus finally turned to face her, and she could see the pain in his eyes, the exhaustion that came from trying so hard to do everything right. I'm scared too, he admitted, terrified that I'll fail you both again. That somehow I'll let Lily down the way I let you down before. You didn't let me down, Diana said firmly. Moretti was a monster. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? Marcus set down his glass with more force than necessary. I brought him into our lives. I did business with him despite the warnings from my advisors. I was so focused on expanding the company, on building the empire, that I didn't see the danger until it was too late. They stood facing each other across the study, and Diana suddenly saw it clearly. They were both carrying guilt for things beyond their control, both trying to atone for perceived failures, both terrified of failing again. We're quite a pair, aren't we? She said with a sad smile, both convinced we're not good enough for that little girl sleeping down the hall. Marcus's expression softened slightly. She is pretty amazing, isn't she? She is, Diana agreed. And she deserves parents who can figure out how to work together instead of taking out their fears on each other. I want that too, Marcus said quietly. But Diana, I need to know. Is there any part of you that wants to try again? Not for Lily's sake, but for us? Or am I just fooling myself that what we had could ever be rebuilt? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and risk. Diana thought about all the reasons to say no. The years apart, the secrets kept, the fundamental ways they'd both changed. But she also thought about the way Marcus had looked at Lily over pancakes, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to their daughter, the fact that he'd established an entire foundation in her memory because he'd needed some way to honor what they'd had. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't know if we can rebuild what we had. Too much has changed. We've both changed. But maybe, she took a deep breath, maybe we could build something new. Something that acknowledges the past but doesn't try to recreate it. Marcus studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I could live with that, he said. New, different, but together. Together, Diana agreed, and for the first time since returning to his life, she reached out and took his hand. For Lily, and maybe, eventually, for us. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. And standing there in his study, with the Manhattan lights glittering beyond the windows and their daughter sleeping safely down the hall, both of them dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way forward. Not back to what they'd been, but toward something new. Something built on honesty and second chances, and the fierce love they both felt for the brave little girl who had walked into a restaurant and changed everything. The weeks that followed their confrontation brought a subtle shift in the household. Diana and Marcus moved around each other with more care, more honesty, slowly learning to communicate in ways they hadn't even in their first marriage. The walls between them began to lower, brick by careful brick. By late June, Diana had taken on a more substantial role at the Catherine Thornwood Foundation, her legal background proving invaluable as they expanded their programs. The irony of working for an organization bearing her own name while everyone believed she was someone else wasn't lost on her, but she threw herself into the work with a passion that surprised even herself. Helping other women and children in crisis gave her a sense of purpose beyond simple survival. Lily continued her summer tutoring program, her natural intelligence allowing her to catch up quickly with her peers. The nightmares became less frequent, though she still occasionally woke crying, convinced they'd have to leave. Each time, either Marcus or Diana would sit with her until she fell back asleep, sometimes both of them, a united front against her fears. It was during one of these late-night vigils that Lily asked the question that would change everything. Dad, she said sleepily, curled against Marcus's side while Diana sat on the other edge of the bed. Do you have any other family, like grandparents or aunts or uncles? Marcus and Diana exchanged glances across Lily's small form. They had been so focused on rebuilding their immediate family that they hadn't discussed Marcus's other loss, the wound that had never fully healed. My parents passed away many years ago, Marcus said carefully, stroking Lily's hair. But I did have a twin brother. His name was Ethan. Lily's eyes flew open, sleep forgotten. A twin? Like identical twins? Yes, Marcus confirmed, feeling Diana's eyes on him. We looked exactly alike. Where is he? Lily asked with the innocent directness of childhood. Marcus felt his chest tighten with the familiar ache. Ethan disappeared 25 years ago. We were on his sailboat and there was a terrible storm. The Coast Guard rescued me, but they never found Ethan. So he might still be out there somewhere? Lily pressed, her young mind making the logical leap. Like how Mom was gone, but then she came back? The question hit Marcus like a physical force. For 25 years, he'd accepted Ethan's death as fact, mourned him as thoroughly as he'd later mourned Diana. But Diana had come back. If she could return from the dead, could his certainty about Ethan be just as wrong? It's possible, Marcus admitted, though his tone suggested he thought it unlikely. But it's been a very long time, sweetheart. After Lily finally drifted back to sleep, Marcus and Diana remained in her room for a moment, neither quite ready to leave. You felt him die, Diana said softly, remembering conversations from their early relationship. You told me once that twins have a connection and you felt it break when the storm hit. Marcus nodded, his face shadowed in the dim light from Lily's nightlight. I did, or I thought I did. But now... He looked at Diana, really looked at her. I was so certain you were dead too. I identified your effects. I attended your funeral. I grieved for 5 years. If I could be that wrong about you... You want to search for him again, Diana finished. Is that crazy? Marcus asked, vulnerability clear in his voice. After all this time? Diana reached across Lily's sleeping form and took his hand. You searched for him every year, even when you thought I was dead. If finding me has taught us anything, it's that impossible things can happen. Maybe it's not crazy. Maybe it's just hope. The next morning, Marcus contacted the private investigator who had conducted the most recent search for Ethan 5 years earlier. The man was skeptical at first, reminding Marcus of all the previous dead ends, but Marcus was insistent. My wife came back from the dead, Marcus said simply. Stranger things have happened. The investigator couldn't argue with that logic. Through July and into August, leads trickled in slowly. The investigator retraced old paths with new technology, reaching out to contacts in the South Pacific Islands, where debris from Ethan's boat had washed ashore years ago. For weeks there was nothing but frustration and false starts. Diana watched Marcus's renewed hope with a mixture of support and concern. She understood the need to know, the hunger for closure or reunion, but she worried about what another loss might do to him. They'd found each other again, built this fragile new family. What if searching for Ethan only brought fresh grief? But she kept her concerns to herself and supported him as he'd supported her, understanding that some questions demanded answers, no matter the risk. Meanwhile, Lily's 9th birthday approached in late August. Marcus wanted to do something special, something meaningful that would mark this moment in their lives. Diana suggested a small party with children from Lily's summer program, keeping it simple and manageable. But Marcus had something else in mind as well. One evening, he showed Diana a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, delicately crafted in rose gold, with a smaller version of the distinctive thornwood geometric pattern surrounding a pink sapphire instead of blue. It was sized for a child's finger, with the ability to be resized as she grew. I had it commissioned, Marcus explained. There were only 3 thornwood rings originally, mine, Ethan's, and yours. But Lily is a thornwood too. She deserves her own. Diana's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the beautiful ring. It's perfect, she whispered. She'll treasure it. The birthday party itself was small but joyful. 6 children from Lily's summer program came with their parents, most of whom were clearly curious about the mysterious wife and daughter who had suddenly appeared in Marcus Thornwood's life. The media frenzy from the Foundation Gala had died down, but the story still generated whispers and speculation. Diana had prepared a handmade scrapbook, documenting their life together, both the difficult years in hiding and their recent months as a reunited family. When Lily opened it, tears streamed down her face as she paged through images of their journey. The shed in Millfield, her old stuffed bear, photos Marcus had commissioned of their trip to Disney World the previous month, pictures of the 3 of them at dinner at the park, building a life together. This is the best present ever, Mom, Lily said, hugging the scrapbook to her chest. I have something for you too, Marcus said, kneeling before his daughter with the velvet box. The room fell silent as Lily opened it, her eyes going wide at the ring inside. There were only 3 thornwood rings in the world until now, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. This one was made just for you. It means you're officially part of the Thornwood legacy, Lily. Not just by blood, but by choice. You belong here. You belong with us. Lily slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit perfectly, then threw her arms around Marcus's neck. Does this mean I'm really a Thornwood now? Forever? You've always been a Thornwood, Marcus assured her, holding her close. This just makes it official. I love you, Dad, Lily whispered against his shoulder. Marcus closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the simple perfection of those words. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. And after the party, when the guests had gone and Lily was playing with her new toys in her room, Diana found Marcus on the terrace. The August evening was warm, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled over Manhattan. That was beautiful, Diana said, standing beside him at the railing. The ring, what you said to her, everything. She deserves to know she belongs, Marcus replied, that this isn't temporary, that we're a family now. Diana was quiet for a moment, then spoke the words that had been building in her heart for weeks. I've been thinking about us, about our future. Marcus turned to face her, his expression guarded but hopeful. Lily starts school in a few weeks, Diana continued. I'll have more time on my hands. I want to take on the Director of Legal Affairs position at the Foundation. Make it official, not just volunteer work. I want to build something of my own again, have my own identity beyond just mother or your wife. I think that's a wonderful idea, Marcus said. The Foundation was always meant to be yours anyway. It has your name, your vision for helping others. There's something else, Diana said, her heart racing. I've been uncomfortable living here as your guest, accepting your charity. I want to contribute. The legal position would give me that, but also... She took a deep breath. I think it's time I move back into our bedroom, if that's still what you want. Marcus's face transformed, hope and joy breaking through the careful control he'd maintained. It's what I want more than anything, he said, but only if you're ready. Diana, I meant what I said about building something new. I don't expect things to be exactly as they were before. Diana stepped closer, close enough to feel his warmth. Life's too short for going slowly, she said softly. We've already lost 5 years. I don't want to waste any more time being afraid. That night, for the first time since her return, Diana slept in the master bedroom. They moved cautiously at first, rediscovering each other with the wonder of new lovers and the familiarity of old ones. Marcus traced the new lines on her face, the evidence of hard years and harder choices. Diana felt the tension in his shoulders, the weight of grief and responsibility he'd carried alone for so long. Afterward, she lay with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong. I never thought I'd have this again, she murmured. There were so many nights I lay awake in that shed, missing you, wondering if I'd made the right choice. You're here now, Marcus said, stroking her hair. That's all that matters. But even as he said it, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. He reached for it, then went completely still. What is it? Diana asked, sitting up. Marcus stared at the screen, his face pale in the dim light. It's the investigator. He found something. About Ethan. The message was brief but earth-shattering. A sailing vessel matching the description of Ethan's boat had been discovered years ago on a remote island in the South Pacific. More importantly, local records indicated a Western man had arrived around the same time in the late 90s, injured and suffering from memory loss. He'd lived on the island for several years before leaving on a supply ship around 2005. The name he'd used was Eli Black. Eli Black, Marcus repeated, his hands trembling. Ethan Blackwood. It could be a coincidence, or it could be him simplifying his name with partial memory, Diana finished. Marcus, this could really be him. Over the next 2 weeks, as summer turned toward fall, the investigator followed the trail. Passenger manifests from New Zealand, immigration records, employment histories. The leads were frustratingly sparse, going cold repeatedly, but then picking up again just when hope seemed lost. Finally, in early September, the call came that changed everything. We found him, the investigator said without preamble when Marcus answered. Your brother is alive, Mr. Thornwood. He's been living under the name Eli Waters in a small coastal town in Oregon, Bayview. He owns a boat repair shop. Marcus stood in his office, unable to speak, unable to breathe. The investigator continued, sending photos that appeared on Marcus's computer screen moments later. A man who was unmistakably his twin stared back at him from the images. Older, weathered by years and sun, his hair longer and streaked with gray. Leaner than Marcus, his face marked by hardship. But the bone structure was identical, the set of the jaw, the shape of the eyes. It was like looking at a version of himself who had lived a completely different life. Marcus rushed home in the middle of the day, finding Diana reviewing legal documents at the dining table. He showed her the photos without a word. Oh my God, she whispered, staring at the screen. Marcus, it's him. Despite everything, despite the years, it's definitely him. I need to go to him, Marcus said, his voice urgent. Today, tomorrow, as soon as possible. Then we'll all go, Diana said firmly. This is a family matter. Lily should be there. She deserves to meet her uncle. The next morning, they boarded Marcus's private jet bound for Oregon. Lily was beside herself with excitement, peppering her parents with questions about Uncle Ethan, about sailing, about what he might be like. Marcus tried to answer, sharing stories from their childhood, but a part of him was terrified. What if Ethan didn't want to be found? What if he'd stayed away deliberately? What if he blamed Marcus for the accident? Diana seemed to sense his fears. She reached across the aisle and took his hand, squeezing gently. Whatever happens, she said quietly, we're here with you. Bayview, Oregon was exactly as the investigator had described it, a picturesque coastal town nestled between forested hills and the vast Pacific Ocean. They checked into the town's only hotel, a charming inn overlooking the harbor where fishing boats and pleasure craft bobbed gently in the afternoon sun. Waters Marine Repair is about a mile down the coast, Marcus said, studying the map on his phone. The investigator says Ethan is usually there until 6. Can we walk on the beach first? Lily asked, pressing her face against the window. I've never seen the Pacific Ocean. Marcus and Diana exchanged glances, both recognizing that a brief delay might help calm Marcus's nerves. They spent an hour walking along the shore, Lily collecting shells and interesting stones, while her parents walked hand in hand behind her. The familiar rhythm of the waves seemed to soothe something in Marcus, and by the time they returned to the hotel, he appeared more centered. I think I should go alone first, he said, as they prepared to head to the repair shop. If Ethan does remember me, seeing all of us at once might be overwhelming. We'll wait here, Diana agreed. Take as much time as you need. At 5:30, Marcus stood in his rental car outside Waters Marine Repair, gathering his courage. The business was housed in a weathered building right on the harbor, with boats in various states of repair lined up on trailers in the yard. A hand-painted sign featured a simple blue wave design and the words "Quality Repairs, Fair Prices." Marcus watched as a man emerged from the workshop, wiping his hands on a rag. Even from a distance, even with 25 years of changes, there was no mistaking who it was. Ethan, his twin brother, alive and whole and real. Marcus stepped out of the car, his legs trembling, and approached slowly. Ethan had his back turned, securing the door of the workshop. When he heard footsteps, he called out without turning. "Shop's closed for the day. Back tomorrow at 8. "I'm not here about a boat, Ethan," Marcus said, his voice unsteady with emotion. Ethan froze. For a long moment he didn't move at all, as if he'd been turned to stone. Then very slowly he turned around. The brothers stared at each other across 25 years of separation. Recognition flashed in Ethan's eyes, followed by shock, and then something Marcus couldn't quite read. "Marcus," Ethan said finally. It wasn't a question. His voice was rougher than Marcus remembered, weathered like the rest of him, but unmistakably his brother's voice. "You remember me," Marcus said, relief and new tension warring in his chest. Ethan gave a short, humorless laugh. "Hard to forget your own face." He studied Marcus intently, taking in the expensive clothes, the air of success and authority. "You look prosperous. Still running those fancy hotels?" The casual reference to Marcus's business, to their life before, confirmed what Marcus had begun to suspect. Ethan had his memory. He knew who he was, knew who Marcus was, and he'd stayed away anyway. "Why didn't you come back?" Marcus asked, the question that had haunted him for 2.5 decades finally spoken aloud. "Why let me think you were gone?" Ethan sighed, suddenly looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "It's complicated, and not a conversation to have standing in a parking lot." He gestured toward a modest house on a bluff overlooking the harbor. "My place is up there. If you want to talk, that's where we'll do it." The walk up the winding path felt endless. Marcus's mind raced with questions, fears, hopes, but he forced himself to stay silent, to wait until they were somewhere private. Ethan's house was small but well maintained, a 2-bedroom structure with large windows overlooking the ocean. The interior was sparse but clean, decorated with the practical minimalism of someone who had learned to live with only what was necessary. Ethan poured 2 whiskeys without asking, handing one to Marcus before settling into a worn armchair. Marcus took the couch, holding the glass but not drinking, too focused on his brother to think about anything else. "You want to know why I stayed away?" Ethan said. Not a question, but a statement. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Ethan took a long drink, then spoke. "After the storm, I washed up on that island half dead. Broken ribs, concussion, hypothermia. The locals saved me, nursed me back to health. It took weeks to recover physically, months before my memory fully returned." He paused, staring into his glass. "By the time I remembered everything, remembered you, remembered our life, I'd been gone over a year. I thought about coming home. Every single day I thought about it." "But you didn't," Marcus said, unable to keep the hurt from his voice. "No," Ethan agreed, "because I realized something during those months of recovery, when I was just Eli with no past, no expectations, no shadow to live under. I realized the storm had given me a gift, a way out." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. A way out of what? Ethan met his eyes, and Marcus saw pain there, old and deep. "Your shadow, Marcus. Being the twin who didn't measure up, the one who wasn't driven enough, successful enough, focused enough." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. I never thought of you that way." "Didn't you?" Ethan challenged. "You were always the golden one. Straight A's in school, while I barely scraped by. You went to Wharton, built a hotel empire. I was the screw-up who wanted to sail around the world instead of building something real." "You weren't a screw-up," Marcus protested. "You were adventurous, creative, everything I wasn't." "But not successful," Ethan said. "Not in the way that mattered to Dad, to our family, to the Thornwood legacy. Every time someone saw us together, they'd ask about you first. How's business, Marcus? How many hotels now, Marcus?" And then, almost as an afterthought, they'd turn to me. "Still sailing, Ethan? When are you going to settle down and do something serious?" Marcus sat in stunned silence. He'd never known. never realized how those comparisons had cut his brother, how the weight of being Marcus Thornwood's twin had crushed Ethan's own sense of worth. "The sailing trip," Marcus said slowly, understanding dawning. "You asked me to come because we'd grown so far apart that we barely knew each other anymore," Ethan finished. "I was losing my brother to Thornwood Grand Hotels. That trip was supposed to reconnect us, remind us of when we were just Marcus and Ethan, not the successful one and the disappointing one." "Instead, the storm hit," Marcus said. "Instead, the storm hit," Ethan echoed, "and it gave me what I'd been too afraid to take for myself. A fresh start, a chance to be just Eli Waters' boat repair guy, not Ethan Thornwood, Marcus Thornwood's less successful twin." Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now, years of grief and guilt and missed chances pouring out. "I'm so sorry," he choked out. "I never meant to make you feel that way. You were my brother, my best friend. Losing you, thinking you were dead, it broke me, Ethan." Something in Ethan's expression shifted at those words. "Broke you how?" "Diana was the only thing that kept me going after the storm," Marcus said. "And then 5 years ago, I lost her too. Car accident. At least that's what I thought." He pulled out his phone, showing Ethan a recent photo of Diana and Lily. "Turns out she faked her death to protect me from a dangerous business associate. And she was pregnant when she disappeared. This is Lily, my daughter, your niece. She's 9 years old, and until 2 months ago, I didn't know she existed." Ethan stared at the photo, something cracking in his carefully maintained armor. "You have a daughter," he said softly. "I do," Marcus confirmed. "And she wanted to meet her uncle. She's the one who asked about you, who made me start searching again. She said if her mother could come back from the dead, maybe you could too." Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he handed back the phone. "She looks like Mom." "She does," Marcus agreed. "She has your adventurous spirit too. Asked me to teach her to sail so she could help find you someday." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then he stood and walked to his bedroom, returning with a small wooden box. He opened it, and there, perfectly preserved, was the second Thornwood ring. The geometric pattern surrounding the blue sapphire caught the fading sunlight streaming through the windows. "I kept it all these years," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "Couldn't bring myself to sell it or throw it away. Every time I looked at it, I thought about you. Wondered if you'd moved on, forgotten about me, built a life without your disappointing twin brother." "I never forgot," Marcus said, standing. "I searched for you every year. Hired investigators, checked databases, followed every lead no matter how unlikely. And I never, not for one single day, thought of you as disappointing. You were my brother, my other half. When I thought I lost you, part of me died too." The brothers stood facing each other, two halves of the same whole, separated